Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. I'm your host, Hal Blood. Sitting here in our new studio with our new co-host, Lee Shands.
That's me.
Right. That's Lee, also known as Good Lee.
I guess. I don't know how that all happened, but actually Bad Lee is the one that named me Good Lee, so I'm all good with it.
Yeah. So been a few changes here at Big Woods over the last few weeks, and some of the guys have moved along. Some of the guys had to take a break, like your son Steven there. He's going to get deployed again, and he doesn't have time with his young family getting ready to get deployed this coming fall. He's just going to take a little break for a while. We'd probably get him to do a couple of things in between. But so anyways, we've got some new things going on. And one of them's this podcast. We're trying to upgrade equipment and kind of make it better, more better looking for you, professional looking, whatever you want to call it. And so Joe has decided to move on to other things. He told me the other day his father is getting older and he's going to have to start doing more with their family business and stuff. So anyway, I think me and Lee can handle her all right. We'll still have some guests and continue on. But we wanted to start out this one with it'd be an opportune time to talk about the history of Big Woods Bucks and how it started, because a lot of you don't know. Some of you probably weren't even born when we got started. Some of you young people. So we're gonna talk about how we actually started, and because Lee was pretty much from the beginning when we took on, started having some team members to come along with us. Hey, Hal here. Just take a minute here to talk about Christmas and Associates. It's Dan and Mark Christmas, and they've got a fabulous real estate business over in the Adirondacks. If you're interested in buying land or hunting leases or anything going in the Adirondacks, you want to talk to Mark and Dan about it. They've got all kinds of listings. They'll walk you through on-site tours of land, whether it's for hunting, fishing, recreation, no matter what you want to do. They got it going on, and the address is landandcamps.com. So maybe you can have your own piece of the Adirondacks and shoot some of them big Adirondack bucks over there. Being the low-tech guy I am, there's one thing I've learned to embrace with technology, and it's my Onyx. I used to carry maps and GPS when it finally came out and stuff, but the Onyx has eliminated that because I've got my GPS in my phone now with my Onyx app. I can mark everything in that. It's helpful that I can show other people by putting a pin in if I want to send somebody to a place. Being a guide, that's important, I can give them the pin, put it in there as, I text it to them, whatever. So if you want to get your Onyx, get your Big Woods Bucks code, BWB, and get you 20% off, but I highly recommend it. Give you a little update. Skinner Sights. We all know they're the best site going, but it's a great company because Andy and the crew there are innovative, and they're always thinking up either new models to make a site for, improve the sites, making mounts for scopes, and now they've come on with their own line of scopes and red dots. Whatever Andy does in the company, it's top-notch, first quality, and they stand behind everything, and we're glad to have them as a partner, and we hope you'll try their sites, and you can trust your life with those, and they're going to get you the game. So get your Skinner Sights, and you can trust me that you're going to be glad you did. Just wanted to talk a little bit about minus 33 and the wool they have, which I believe is best wool going. Whether it's base layers or your socks or whatever you're wearing, you got to have wool. I've been stressing that for people for years, to wear your wool, whether it's the outerwear or even your base layers and socks. I've been to the tour of the plant, see how they make their socks, and it's quality, the fit is right, and they're going to be long-lasting. I've got socks I've had now for several years, and they look like I'll have them for several years more before they even think about wearing out. So I trust my life to wool, and you can too. Minus 33. Just to start off, it actually, probably the beginning of it was when I wrote my first book back in 2003, Hunting Big Woods Bucks, Secrets to Tracking and Stalking Whitetails. So I had wrote that book, and it did pretty well. I sold quite a few out of the house. I think we sold, I don't know how many copies ended up getting sold over the years, but we sold 10,000 hardcovers in the first 6 months, I think. And then that just kind of turned into about the same time we started going to Ontario, wasn't it? Right? About 2003, I think it was.
I think you guys went the first year. I didn't go. I think that was 2003, and then I went in 2004.
Yeah. So it all kind of coincided with that. And I remember when I first wrote the book, then I started getting asked to do some seminars at the sportsman shows of Vermont and the Maine Sportsman Show and stuff. And so I started doing seminars and telling everybody how I was tracking them bucks down and all that. And I see a lot of blank stares out in the audience, and I knew what was going on, or I figured I knew. They was looking at me and saying, well, that tall drink of water can probably do it, but I don't think I can. So because I was quite a bit younger then. And so anyways, I said, geez, if we had the guys, some of the guys, and it was basically the guides in the beginning. Was you guiding a week for me back then yet? Maybe?
Nope. It started out, it was Libby and Mike and Tommy and Mike Featherstone were guiding for you. And I wasn't doing anything for you because I had my own business, but you just asked me if I wanted to be part of the team. And then I think shortly after that, within a couple years, I started doing 1 week for you.
Yeah. So, but basically you was on the team like about at the beginning with the other guides. Yeah. So there was, I don't know, half a dozen of you that started. And I did that. I wanted to do that because everybody has different ways they hunt. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to kill a buck. So I thought it would be, if all the guys were out there telling, their techniques and stories and something, somebody would relate, or everybody would relate to somebody, right? It's like ball teams. Everybody's got their favorite players or players they could learn from or be like or whatever it is. So that's kind of the premise of how Big Woods started, and it was all volunteer. I mean, me and Chris, it's kind of funny in the beginning. We didn't have any way to make money except sell a few things, and we had the books, and then how we really got started after that. Actually, I'll back up just a little bit. It was to start to make a business out of it. Chris came to me, and when we were in, I think it was the first or second year we were in Ontario. Me and Chris, he was filming me because he asked me. He said, "We ought to, I'd like to film you hunting and guiding and stuff." So anyways, we were sitting on a log in Ontario, and he goes, "I was thinking," and I talked to Deb, his wife's Deb too, mine wife and his wife's both Deb. So, and he had done at Putnam Investments there, and he said, "What do you think about making a business out of this?" And I go, "Yeah, whatever you think." I said, my situation. I said, I got a guide and run the camps full speed ahead, but if you think there's a way we can mix it in and do it. Yeah, I said, I'll be willing to do that. He said, Chris, he's all business. He goes, "I was thinking we could run it like 60-40. I'd be 40% owner and you'd be 60. And I said, "How about 50-50? And he goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah, why not? 50-50. So that's how we started the business, like basically a handshake deal. And we was 50-50 partners, and he did the bulk of he did all the paperwork, and, he got us incorporated into an LLC or whatever. And he did all of that stuff. And, all he wanted me to do was doing the teaching end of it, and he'd film, and so it was the two of us filming, and then And then when you guys come on, some of the guys grabbed their cameras and did some of that and did seminars. And so that's really how it started. And then come the end of the year, Chris would say, well, we each got to put in $5 more to keep the thing going. I said, all right. So I'd write a check for $5,000. He'd write a check or whatever it was, pick a number. Might have been $10,000 some years. And that's how it ran for years and years. Whatever we would come up minus, we both put it in an equal share, over the years. And it's hard to think back on it now. It's like any business you start, you're always pouring money into it in the beginning, hoping it's going to work someday, So anyways, and I think it was probably, if I had to guess, I think we put money into it for 10 years just without any thought of getting that money back. And then we might, after that, we started doing enough different things where we might have to like lend the company money, and then we could get it back whenever we had it, something like that, maybe for the next 5 years or something like that. So, but we kept it going. And then along the way, we took on some other team members, I'd get some other guides or whatever. And then some of them actually ended up being, the second generation, we call it, right? Your son, Steven.
Yeah, Steven was the first. I think he was the first second generation one.
So we had a few like that. And but what we decided it would be was because the premise, and it still is, the premise of the business is we want to teach you people what we know to help you be better deer hunters or even become deer hunters, because some people they're not even deer hunters and they get interested in it. So, but that's still, our mission hasn't changed. It's been basically really 20 years, maybe a little over, but 20 years, solid 20 years. And the mission hasn't changed. It's to educate, entertain, and educate. And, the method we do it in has changed, because back in the beginning, we had the old tapes, high 8 tapes in the film, and we did DVDs. Remember, we put together.
I remember all that stuff. Remember what a pain it was.
We'd put together a couple of rough DVDs, and they ended up selling pretty good. And that was the method you did back then, And then as technology advanced, we had to kind of try to do some different things to try the best we could to keep up with it. And still me and Chris were doing all of that, the decisions of it, and trying to figure out what we should do and not. And I think we probably made most all of the mistakes that you possibly could make, tried things, and a lot of things didn't work. So
always seemed like we were behind it. We were behind trying to catch up.
Yeah, because we'd try something, but the technology, we couldn't keep up with that. Everything kept just going quicker and quicker and into more things. But we still kept teaching, and, a lot of it, like I said, we had fun doing the seminars at shows but with the team, basically what it was we gave we told the people if we brought any new team members on, that it was a platform for them to get, if they wanted to be recognized and teach people and get some recognition, we had the platform to do that. And it was really nothing more. And in the beginning, it was all volunteer in the beginning. And then, like I said, as we went along, just like up until, it's been a couple of years now that we finally had to get out of that the volunteer part of it, because when everybody's volunteering, they got things going on in their life, right? Everybody does. I do, you do. So you put your family and your own business first, or your job, and then what you volunteer at becomes secondary. So we started working into a plan where we could pay everybody something for their effort. Might be a little bit for submitting some pictures or video or whatever it was. We started out that way and just kind of continued with it. And then with some of the positions being, paid positions, either on a commission or whatever. It doesn't matter. So we're trying to worked out of a volunteer system into a real business where you pay people for what they do and all of that. And that's where we're still at. And we still have the platform to for the people that want to take advantage of it and show what they can do or how they do things and teach and educate you. So none of that's changed. Just the people have changed, because I've seen, and you have too, Lee, I mean, how many people, I can't even count how many people came and went over those 20 years.
Yeah.
For various reasons, Some of them moved away. Kev moved away, so he was got into a different phase of his life, got out of guiding. And
Mike doesn't come back to Maine anymore.
Yeah, Mike Featherstone, he's staying in Alaska now. And so a lot of people something comes in their life and life changes. But we've been through a lot of people and had a lot of friends over the years in doing it. And we're in another phase of that. The phase we're into now is we're trying to make things even better. And to do that, it takes a lot of work. It takes work to put out the stuff you people want to see, whether it's see us at the shows or see us just on YouTube. The YouTube thing, I think, has been it's been a game changer for everybody. It's kind of made it where anybody can put a film, their own film on, or their own podcast or whatever they want to do. And we actually moved. We had a YouTube channel a long time ago, quite a few years ago, and we just never did nothing to it because me and Chris didn't see that it was as beneficial, I guess. But again, that's another thing.
That was that transition from videos to.
We were wrong about it, but we didn't know any better. We're not really, we're in the older generation, especially me, and Chris is your age, 59, and so we got the company where we could get it with what our knowledge was of whatever things going on in the day. So we had a few more volunteers come on, and then when Brian Connor come on, he was a guy that he just found us, and he really wasn't much of a hunter, and but he wanted to be, so he was excited, and he just volunteered to help us. He had an expertise in different things, and one of them was he had a friend that helped him out with stuff to how to do things on the internet and YouTube and that stuff. So he was the one that figured out how to get us better presence on YouTube, get the more subscribers and all of that, and move the content around to do that. Now, the team obviously created content to do that, but he was the one that figured out how to do it and made it so we got up over 100,000 subscribers there. And so he worked at that for, pretty much a year or more doing that, amongst other things, and showed that he was serious about it. So we asked him to be the CEO. Chris was about, after 20 years of it, wore out from it.
He was burned out, I think.
Yeah, quite frankly, wore out from it. So, because he was doing most of it, because a lot of the stuff I couldn't do, he was editing a lot of the film. He was editing the podcast, getting it put up. He was a lot of stuff, plus managing all the finances and stuff. So Chris stepped down as the CEO there last year, and we appointed Brian, and now Chris is the CFO, so he still handles the finances, and I'm still just the president, like I started out as.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to just be in the same position.
I can remember from my perspective, you guys may have talked about it that first year that you went to Ontario, but I remember the conversations, because I didn't go until the second year. But if you remember, we went in December, and that was a year it was like 15 or 20 below every morning.
Oh, I kind of forgot about that.
Well, what happened was the very first morning that I ever hunted in Ontario, you and I went out across the lake, and a great big buck had come from the peninsula, huge track.
Yeah.
Came from the peninsula, went out on the lake and went onto an island.
With a doe and a little one.
With a doe and a little one. And I remember you said, well, you got a scope on your gun. It's kind of a poke down across there. You said, I'll go up and see, maybe I'll kick him off the island there. And so you no more than got up on one side of the island because I could see everything.
The island
wasn't
was
that
probably
big of an
like
island.
200 yards by 100.
Yeah, it wasn't that big, a few acres maybe. And I can remember a little skipper, little one, came off the island, and then his mother came off behind him, and she was twice as big as he was. And then the buck came off after her, and he was twice as big as the doe was, but just as bald as you and I are. And I thought, that ain't good. So that was the year we couldn't find. I tracked a buck and found a huge 10-point sheds there. But we had a lot of time at night to talk about it because the hunting was kind of discouraging that year. So I remember those conversations. From my perspective, I think, and again, you guys may have talked about it the year before, but there was quite a lot of discussion that first year that I went about the education and entertainment part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it came natural for me because, you know, when we're guiding people, we're teaching them too, right? You know, you take somebody deer hunting, moose hunting, you're interacting with clients. So it's just a natural thing that you're teaching people. So we just continued on. It wasn't a hard thing to do, really. And some people I know, there's a lot of good deer hunters out there, a lot of good deer hunters, a lot of good trackers, but they don't want to share any info. You know, they'll chat with their buddies and tell stories and something. They won't say a thing about where they were or what they did. I don't get that, you know, because stories and stuff like that was traditionally like back from the cavemen, right? They'd come back from the hunt and they'd
paint on the cave wall.
Yeah, they'd paint it on the wall, but they'd tell the stories, and that's how they learned and passed it on to the younger ones, and that's how they learned. You know, you gotta, if you keep it to yourself, it just dies with you, you know, and then, you know, it's kind of, you didn't offer anything to the world really, you know, so.
I think you'd have a hard time finding how many people live in Jackman? 900?
Yeah, about in the whole valley, yeah.
You'd have a hard time finding more good deer trackers in a town, you know, than Jackman. But I'm friends with a bunch of guys here in town that they want to go out and do their own thing, but they don't want to drag somebody around with them, or camera guy or a client or whatever. And some of them even, you know, they might guide moose hunters or guide bear hunters, but they don't want to guide deer hunters. And I get that because you and I have talked before. It's discouraging in some ways because as hard as it is to kill 200-pound bucks, it's more than 5 times harder to bring somebody with you and either film it or have them kill one. It's probably 10 times as hard. It's brutally hard. So I think that's why a lot of guys, if they tried it a couple of times, they probably got discouraged and just didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Or if you do finally get the chance and you find a big one for the hunter, then they miss it or they don't get a shot. And then
I can remember years ago, one of the first things, the first time I met Larry Benoit in his house, I don't know how long, 25 years ago, he said the biggest difference between guys that get 200-pound bucks and guys that don't is the guys that do hit them when they see them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's all part of it. So, yeah. So anyways, that's kind of the history of it. And, we've had a lot of fun and a lot of stories over the years, and we're going to make a lot more stories and moving forward. Because I have people all the time ask me, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, I don't have any intention of retiring. Yeah. I did stop a couple of years ago. I quit guiding the deer hunters because 2 reasons mainly. I wanted to take Rylan, my grandson, and it just gets harder to take people. You know, even when I started back in, after I got done with Remington there, when I started Bigwoods Outfitters, I was only guiding those first 2 weeks, but you got to go full out for 2 weeks, and then the beginning of the season, you're already starting to get, a little worn down. I was already, when I started this, I must have been like 62 already.
Yeah.
So you get a little worn down, and then it just makes it a little harder at the end. So that's why I said when I was 65, I said I will retire from deer guiding. And
well, the other thing too that figured into that was strange weather. We've had quite a few years in the last 5 or 6 where you'd have good snow the first week or the second week, and then wouldn't get it again until maybe muzzleloading. So you only get so many. That's one of the things when you wrote your book, and I don't know if it's been a while since I read the book. I don't know if you explained it in the book or I've just heard you talk about it when we've done seminars over the years, but you talked about tracking and stalking whitetails, because even in a place like Jackman, Maine, you only get so many good snow days.
Yeah.
If you get 10 days out of a month to 5 weeks, if you get 10 days, that's really good. Really
10
good
days of
tracking
snow
days.
and then you might have 10 days of snow, but it might not be good snow. I've seen a week with solid crust for a week. Yeah, you got snow and you can follow a track, but man, it's not that easy to kill one in that kind of condition. So,
and we've had quite a few years, like I said, lately, where the best tracking week was the first week.
Yeah. Like I was, since I started, back in, I think last year was the 6th year, and 5 out of the 6th year, we had some tracking snow the first week, 5 out of 6 years.
Yep.
Might only be a day or 2 days or something, but we could track that first week. So, got to make hay when the sun shines, right?
Yeah, and I get it. That's one reason why I always thought like Mike Featherstone was like me. He'd guide for you the whole month, and I would guide the whole month, and then we'd only hunt with muzzleloader. And you did that back in the day 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, that's another thing, especially with some of those old muzzleloaders, like you and I started with those 50 caliber Hawkins. You try shooting a running deer down through the Whippies with a 50 caliber patch round ball. It's like throwing a marble down through there. So I always thought it was pretty good. Mike did pretty well, and you did too. And I ended up muzzleloaders for me for a while. I just was cursed with those things, but I really like the new ones.
Yeah.
I want mine. Some people want to shoot with a flintlock, and that's fine. But if I only get 1 week to hunt, when I pull the trigger, I want that thing to go bang.
Yeah. And in a hurry. I remember one time I had got an inline, that old Gonic there that when they come out with those, and it was accurate. It was really nice gun and accurate, but it was no good for the weather. And didn't miss, but it misfired on, I was tracking 2 big bucks together. And I tried to shoot both of them. The first one was a 10-pointer, and he was over 200. Standing 40 yards away from me broadside, and it went click. It didn't even, like, the cap didn't even go off. And I got down, and because it smashes the cap. That Gonic took the old number 11 percussion caps. I had to get my knife and dig it off, get another one out of my pouch, put it on, and I'm watching that buck, and then I was right in the thick firs, and he walked in to the firs, that 10-pointer. I go, gosh. I just got the cap on anyways, and he walked out of sight, and I looked, and like 10 yards beyond, the other one was an 8-pointer, and he was a bigger deer and a bigger rack, and he steps out in the same opening like 10 yards beyond. So I'm like, pulled up on him, and it goes, pet. And he never even looked. He just kept walking right up over the hill there. I was thinking about wrapping that right around a tree, and I was like, I had to strip it down in the woods. I took my jacket off, laid it on the snow, pulled a bolt. It had the little wrench to pull a nipple out of there. It was inside. I had to take the bolt apart, pull it out, the powder hadn't gone off, and I had a little screwdriver I used to carry, a little small one. I got it up there, and I got all the powder out of it, and I put new powder back in through the nipple hole, wound a nipple back on, put another cap on, and fired it, and it went off. So I loaded it up again and struck off on them 2 bucks, and I jumped them one more time. I could see them run, but I didn't get a shot. And come to the end of the day, they were going to cross the road right at my snowmobile where I started from, and they saw the snowmobile and turned around. I'd come full circle. I jumped on the machine and headed out. It was the end of the day. But
Well, why don't you, I don't know if we've ever touched on this. You might have when I wasn't on the podcast, but it's still one of my favorite videos, and it's one of the earliest ones that we put out was, I remember you and Mike Featherstone were hunting together, and I think you had told me you had run out of bullets for your gun.
that's
So
right.
you ended up with your old 50 caliber Hawk, and tell them how that happened and about that.
Yeah.
That was one of our first videos, wasn't it? That
Yeah,
we put out?
it's on the first video that we put out. It was kind of that video we put out to kind of correspond with the book. We put things together in categories and stuff. And it was wasn't a lot of killing on that one. It was a lot of teaching stuff, And yeah, so I had built that back when I was lobstering back in the 80s. It was, you could buy them Hawk and rifle kits and put them all together and blue them and do the whole thing, stain the stock. And so that wasn't the time I was out of bullets. That was before I even had the Gonic, because that goes way back. And me and Featherstone, we used to hunt together quite a bit during muzzleloader. We'd go together, we'd hunt together, but we'd go in the same area and stuff. And he had shot his buck that year because he was filming me. I'd had a camera, he did, and so anyways, we picked this track up, and it was kind of headed like migrating, kind of really, but it was looking for does all the way, and we went a long way. I don't know how many miles we went, and we ended up finally jumped it. Didn't see it, jumped it. It made a loop up on the mountain, come back down around, and then kept headed the way it was headed, like it was headed down the valley. And so I'm sneaking down there. It had crossed an old logging road there. And I'm just sneaking along, and I'm looking way ahead. It was kind of mostly pretty good hardwoods. And I can see him laying there back too. He'd gone down, and he must have probably fed around a little bit, but he was laying facing away, and it was windy. And it was probably a good 75 yards down there, maybe 80. It's a pretty good poke. And I had a peep sight on that. And you know how you don't want it to get away because it was a big one. It had a big rack, and it was a big deer. And so I was kind of like, there was kind of an opening here. And I said, maybe I can get a little closer and stuff. So I started easing ahead, and he'd turn his head back and forth, but he never did turn around. And I should have, you know how you Monday morning quarterback. So
Right.
I should have just kept easing ahead because it was windy enough and he wasn't going to hear me. But, you're like, geez, I think I can. Finally, I said, I think I can get him, because I could see about 6-8 inches of his back sticking out of the snow. There was a pretty good amount of snow. And I said, geez, I can shoot that thing all right if I just pull right down on his back there where it goes into the snow. So I pulled up. I sent one, because they never went off quick anyways. It was like click, boom, bang, off it goes. And I fired, and the thing just stands up and starts looking around, and I'm like, oh. So I start loading. I'm sitting down, and I'm trying to load it, and the buck turns around. He starts walking right towards me. And I got the rod now. I got the powder in, and I'm trying to get the bullet down the barrel. And when he'd look towards me, I'd stop. And that buck had walked right up 20 yards from me. Beautiful buck, 10-pointed, beautiful buck. And I couldn't get it. I couldn't do anything else to get it loaded, and he just wandered out through the woods, kept going, never ran, never saw me or nothing. Yeah. And I think that's when I said I got to get an inline. A guy said got into those Gonics anyways, but the time I went and got the next one I got was the Omega when Thompson come out with them, and I went down. I said I'm going down to Kittery Trading Post, and I'm gonna look at every muzzle loader there is and find one that seems to fit right. By then they'd come out with the 209 Prima system, ignition system, which was hotter and better. But the one that made my last straw was, again, this was the one about when I didn't have bullets from my Gonic. I went to get it out because we were always guiding all fall, and so it's on Sunday before muzzleloader season. I dug it out and I got 3 bullets, and I'm like, well, I'm probably going to shoot one to make sure it's sighted, and then so anyways, I said I can't use that, so I dug out that Hawken gun again, and this one here. Then me and Mike, we went into remote camp, stayed in there, and first morning it snowed in the night and stuff, and there was this track that was like half filled in with snow crossing the road, and I looked at it and I said, I don't know. I said, there's got to be something fresher than that. Rode around a little bit more and couldn't find anything else. I said, I'm going to go get on that one. Well, little did I know he was laying 200 yards from the road. I walked down in there on his track, came to his bed where he just got out of it, and it was a little snow in it, because I think when I stopped the truck, maybe the second time, he just said, I better get out of here. And I didn't go that far. I probably tracked him for like an hour, and he was going up this ridge, and it was snowing like crazy. And I'm tiptoeing up this ridge, and I'm thinking to myself, he's probably already seen me, because the time I got to the ridge, I'm like, geez, he's probably up there seen me. But he didn't. He got over the edge enough. He stood up in front of me at like 15 or 20 yards. I watched him stand up, this big neck come up behind the log, and I'm bringing the gun up, and it's got the Lyman peep sight on the tang, and I'm going like this, and I'm pulling on the sight, not on the hammer, because the hammer's on. I'm left-handed, and I got to reach across to get it. But just instinctively, I was like pulling on my 94 Winchester or something. And just then I reached over, and when I clicked it back, he took off. I went to shoot and almost fell down, never got a shot off. But I shot at him 2 or 3 times that day and never cut a hair running shots at that thing with him, talking about them round balls. I don't know where it was going, but I was swinging right on him, like shots with a rifle you'd have easy.
Shooting through whips.
And that's when I said, I'm done with it. I got to go get a muzzle loader that's going to be a little bit better.
The 2 times that I remember, it's funny how it's not the successes that really burn in your mind so much as the failures sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 things that the first time I remember, I just got married, and I was in my early 20s. I was trying to get my house done so Kelly and I could move into it. So I'd used up all my vacation and everything. So I only got to hunt Saturdays and maybe one other day off in November, and I didn't end up getting a deer. And I always shot a deer back then, shot a buck every year. So I went out and bought a 50 caliber Hawken, because that's what Jeremiah Johnson had, right? They might have had something better then. I don't know if they did, but I got a 50 caliber Hawken, and it was a beautiful rifle. But I remember the very first day I had that in the woods. I was up in the New Vineyard Mountains. I was living in New Vineyard at the time, and a great big buck got up in front of me and went. And I remember when I pulled the trigger, it went click, and then the hammer fell, and it went snap, and then it went bang. So it was click, snap, bang. I'm pretty sure the deer was out of the picture before the gun ever went off. Yeah. And I thought, boy, that's going to take some getting used to.
Yeah.
And that was the very first day I was ever in the woods with a muzzleloader. And then I think the first year that I went to Ontario, you guys had the Omegas. I still had one of those. The very first year I had that Thompson Center. It was called a Thunderhawk. It looked kind of like a bolt action, but it still had those number 11 percussion caps. And I remember coming off the peninsula there. It was like last thing in the evening, and it was on one of those beaver bogs because that's where we used to see them, right? It's about the only place you could see back before they started cutting up there was around those bogs and those swales and stuff. And it had been raining all day, I remember. And I remember pulling up on one of the best bucks I've ever seen in my life and pulling the trigger on that, and that thing just went snap, and that was it. And so, yeah, I've almost wrapped a muzzleloader around a tree a couple times.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I got one other thing. We were talking about how it all got started, you know, because everybody's got a different perspective. I remember it was probably the first year or two that Big Woods bucks that we'd, you know, trying to promote ourselves, and we were going to shows and everything. I remember that Beagleware signed up the Benoits and signed up us, and we were going to get free Beagleware. And I remember thinking, boy, we've arrived. We're going to get free wool, right? So I think that went, maybe a couple years, and they went out of business, and that was the end of our Beagleware.
yeah. But we moved on to better stuff.
Yeah, we did.
It was all part of the learning process and moving along. So, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it was one step at a time.
Well, it seemed to me, we've said this before, it seemed more like it was 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Well, yeah, it was. Seems like now we're moving right along pretty good, though, and we'll keep at it. As long as I can get out there and go, I'm going to still be after them, trying to teach people what to do and keep things rolling.
Well, that's one of the things I learned from you when I first met you 25 years ago was, you know, my father had probably the biggest influence on me of anybody in my life. And then you're right up there too. But my dad was a wonderful teacher in a lot of ways, but my dad had a tendency to sometimes be negative if things didn't go bad. He'd dwell on the negative. I remember when I first met you, he was like, when bad stuff happens, you just push through it and keep going and stay positive.
Yeah. Life is easier that way.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And again, my dad taught me so many wonderful things. He was a wonderful dad, but sometimes he dwelt on stuff when you're better off to just let it go and move on.
Yeah. Oh, I think my father was that way. It might have been that generation.
Probably that generation. Yeah.
My father and mother both had kind of a negative streak, and I don't know why that was, but maybe that's why we're not like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Learned from
Skip the generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so anyways, now you know the history of Big Woods and what we're about and where we're going, and we'll keep moving ahead. And so we'll wrap this up and support our sponsors. I always forget that. I get done this enough, and I say, you got to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you got to hit the bell for notifications, right? Don't you remember all this, Lee?
Nope.
You're going to have to help me out with this stuff.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll get used to it. See, I never was the co-host. I was always the guest.
Yeah. Well, you was a fill-in co-host.
Yeah.
Now you're official. Yeah, that's where the big money comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, follow us on Facebook. We got Instagram and stuff, but I don't think me and you do that. But a lot of the guys do, and we're on there anyway somehow. And support our sponsors, please, because there's what makes this podcast, keeps us going. And till next time, good luck on the trail.